and I'm pounding on the kiosk, asking the woman behind the kiosk, can you give me a refund? Can you schedule me for another train? And she says, well, it's out of my hands. There's nothing I can do. You have to pay full price for the next fare. I walk out of Chicago Union Station. I have $50 in my bank account, and I realize I don't have enough money for a train ticket, but I might have enough money for some pizza.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Howl Podcast. I'm Ethan Shanty. We're doing something different on this week's episode of the show, and it's going to contain sensitive subject matter, so just be advised. My guest today is Misha Tenser. Hi, Misha.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for being here. So we'll get back to Misha in just a minute, but first I want to tell you that Misha's story really stuck out to me the first time I heard it, because although we've covered many topics on the show before, we haven't had too many stories that delved into mental health, and we haven't had any about people who have spent time under psychiatric care. And I wanted to invite Misha back to learn where he is today and find out what life has been like since that time in the hospital. So right now we're going to listen to Misha's original story together, and we'll be back with him soon to find out what life is like now. Here he is live on stage at the Waterhole in Saranac Lake.
So I want to tell you a story about the psych ward, which is not cheery subject matter, so apologies in advance. When I was 18, I was a freshman in college. I was admitted to the adult psych ward at Bassett Hospital in Cooperstown. And when I arrived there was a nurse named Elva who sort of showed me around the unit. Elva had this beautiful sing-songy voice, and she was covered in tattoos and piercings. So she reminded me kind of a punk rock Disney princess. So Elva showed me this large open day room where there were a bunch of sticky-looking tables, plastic bookshelves with a bunch of periodicals, I don't know, Birdwatchers Quarterly or something, and a TV, an old TV covered in shatterproof glass. She also showed me the nurse's station, which was also sealed in shatterproof glass, which patients called the fishbowl, because you could see into it like fish. So, after the tour, Elva took me to my room, where I met my roommate, Matt. Matt was sitting on the bed when I came into the room, and he stood up to meet me, which is when I realized he was a good probably 5 or 6 heads taller than me. I'm talking like 6'8", 6'9". And I guess I looked spooked when he stood up. He was in his late 40s, built like a scarecrow, 6'8". I looked spooked, and Elva told me, don't worry, Matt's one of the good ones. Which ended up being true. Matt sort of took me under his wing. We talked a little bit about what brought us to the psych ward. He told me a little bit about his story. He said he was deployed in the military in Afghanistan. When he came home to his town, he found his house boarded up and condemned due to some sort of animal infestation. He sued the town, lost on a technicality, and since then he'd been traveling around, sleeping outside. I told him a little bit about my story. I said I wasn't handling the college transition well, I was depressed, I wasn't getting out of bed, I couldn't get out of bed, I wasn't going to class, I was in danger of losing my scholarship, and I couldn't stop thinking about dying. Matt said he knew how I felt, and he gave me 2 pieces of advice. He said, take your meds, and don't make any enemies. So for the next 8 days in the psych ward, I ate a lot of Jell-O, red Jell-O specifically, in case you were curious. Watched a lot of Adam Sandler movies and Adam Sandler movie marathons, which kind of gets old after a while. And on the day before I was discharged, a man named Benji came in. Benji was in his 60s, he had a long ponytail. He brought his guitar in to do music therapy with us. He also brought a bunch of musical instruments with him. So some drums, tambourine, and a miniature xylophone, like a child-sized xylophone, which I took immediately. So Benji played all the classics with us. He played Good Vibrations, Yellow Submarine, and then one song by a band called Wild Cherry called Play That Funky Music. Maybe an odd choice for a psych ward, I don't know. So Benji was playing this song. We were all sort of, tapping our instruments along. And he hit that famous lyric, play that funky music, white boy. And I started laughing. I was laughing so hard that I started crying, like my chest was heaving. And I sort of realized I hadn't laughed like that probably in 3-4 months. And so I had this moment where my tears actually started turning into ugly crying, into sobbing. And I was nervous that people around me, maybe in this music therapy group, would notice and say something, or I would be reprimanded or something for crying, which didn't happen because that's probably standard practice for a psych ward. So after this happened, I went back to my room. I was talking to Matt, and Matt asked me, "You're being discharged tomorrow. What's the first thing you're going to do?" And I thought about it. I thought about it for a good couple minutes before I responded. I considered I could go for a walk, I could climb a tree, I could buy some fireworks, I could set the fireworks off in the tree. Probably not a good idea. But I told him, no, you know what? I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to buy a pint of ice cream, and I'm going to eat it by the river. And he said, "What kind of ice cream are you going to buy?" And I said, "Cherry Garcia." You're familiar, good. And he said, "That sounds like a good plan." That's my story. Thanks so much.
That was Misha live on stage at the Waterhole in Saranac Lake. Now we're joined by Zoom. Misha, your story ends with you getting a pint of Cherry Garcia. So what happens after that?
Yeah, so I got out of the psych ward actually 2 days after Thanksgiving, and I was alone in Cooperstown, New York, and I had my wallet, a duffel bag of clothes, and a phone. So I had the pint of Cherry Garcia already consumed. So I called up my friend, my childhood friend Becca, who came to pick me up and took me back to her family's place outside of Rochester. At her family's place in Rochester, her parents fed me some Thanksgiving Day leftovers, some underseasoned turkey and stuffing and cranberry sauce. But I was so grateful for a home cooked meal. I probably hadn't had a home cooked meal in many weeks, probably many months. And we ended up watching some wrestling on TV. So we were sitting in their living room and hanging out with their dog, their huge German Shepherd named Elsa. And I ended up falling asleep on their couch with the dog on top of me, also snoring. So we were all in this funky, smelling, weird mess together. I woke up, it was Sunday, and the family decided to take me to church with them. So we ended up going to their church, their evangelical Christian church. Now, my parents are Jewish. I grew up a-religious, but I decided to go because I was so desperate for some sort of seeking some sort of knowledge, some sort of system of understanding that I went with them. And I walked into the church, and there were people in pews sort of whispering to each other, kind of excitedly, but also sort of in a judgy way. They were asking, "Who's this new guy? What's his deal?" So nervous and excited. I'm sitting in the pew. The pastor comes up to deliver his sermon. There's a band that's playing. And at the end of the service, the pastor asks me to stand up, and the entire congregation prays for me. And I remember thinking, wow, I want to fall through the surface of the earth. Like, this is probably the worst possible outcome of me going to church. So I decide then that I want to leave. I want to leave the church, but I also want to leave New York State and go back to Arizona where my parents live. After the service, I asked Becca to drop me off at the Amtrak station. And I had $400 in my bank account, and I bought a $350 one-way ticket from Rochester to Tucson, Arizona, transferring in Chicago. So I got on the train to Chicago. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, this man gets on in this big hoodie, oversized hoodie. He's carrying a bunch of bags, kind of crusty looking. He sits down right next to me, and I notice something wiggling in his hoodie pocket. And so I ask him, "Hey man, what's going on there? What you got?" And he pulls out this long, slinky, black-footed ferret who he starts feeding cubes of meat out of a Tupperware container because ferrets, they're carnivorous. So he's feeding this ferret cubes of meat, and we're chatting. And so, we're chatting about our families and, why we're going where we're going. He says you should really stop over in Chicago. You should do a layover there. It's a beautiful city. There's good food. You should spend some time there. And I say, well, I don't think I can do it this time, but maybe next time, we'll see what happens. So anyway, we get to Chicago Union Station. The man and his ferret get off the train, and I get off the train and I start heading to my transfer. But I realize I'm going in the wrong direction, and I end up missing my train to Tucson. So I go back to the kiosk and I'm pounding on the kiosk, asking the woman behind the kiosk, can you give me a refund? Can you schedule me for another train? I can't afford to just buy another train ticket. And she says, well, it's out of my hands. There's nothing I can do. You have to pay full price for the next fare. So I walk out of Chicago Union Station and I'm walking around the loop in downtown Chicago. I have $50 in my bank account and I realize, well, I don't have enough money for a train ticket, but I might have enough money for some pizza. So I go to Giordano's, I sit down, I order a personal size deep dish pizza and a Diet Coke. And the pizza and the Diet Coke comes, I eat it. It's the most delicious thing I've had in probably years. I scarf it down and I'm still hungry. So I ask the waiter, do you have any dessert? And he says, yeah, we have this homemade strawberry ice cream. You should really try it. It's quite good. So I order the strawberry ice cream. He brings the strawberry ice cream and the bill. I'm eating the ice cream. I look at the bill. It's $54 without tip. So I'm rifling through my duffel bag looking for cash, change. I see some clothes. I see my notebook, some books. I see a bottle of cologne, some Drakkar Noir. It's like two-thirds of the way full. And I'm like, well, this must be worth at least $20, right? So I wave the waiter over. He comes over, and I sort of start explaining my situation. And I'm like, I can't afford to pay this entire bill, but maybe I can give you $50 and then you can take the Drakkar Noir for the remainder. And he's like, no, I absolutely cannot do that. First of all, this bottle is two-thirds full. Second of all, you can't barter for a restaurant bill. This is not how this works. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my employee discount on your meal, and you're going to pay me, and you're going to walk out. You're not going to tip me, and you're never going to come back. And I said, okay. So I paid him the money I had left. I walked out of Giordano's with my duffel bag and my wallet and my phone. And I'm calling desperately anybody who can wire me some money to get me back to Tucson, Arizona, to get me the train ticket. I end up walking east as nobody's calling me back. I end up walking east toward Lake Michigan, and I sit in the sand on the beach by Navy Pier. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, well, I guess this is probably where I'm going to sleep tonight because I don't have any other options. Nobody's calling me back. And I'm sitting there. There's somebody selling fruit. There's somebody selling little bits and baubles. I'm sitting in the sand, and I get a call from my mom. And my mom says, okay, we'll wire you enough to get you back to Tucson. And I say, you know what? Actually, I think I'm going to stay in Chicago for a while. So the next period of my life, I lived in Chicago for 4 years. And that's how it went.
And now you're back in Syracuse.
Now I'm back in Syracuse. Yep. I actually started writing poems in the psych ward. At the time of that story, in the psych ward, things are so chaotic and controlled at the same time. And there's a little room for interiority, and there's, sort of ironically, little room for vulnerability. So in the poems that I was writing in the psych ward, I was trying to kind of work things out on my own terms. And that sort of led me to poetry and led me to creative writing. And this is something I wanted to study. I wanted to learn about formally, but I also wanted to practice as much as possible. So I ended up in Syracuse because I went to grad school at Syracuse University, and I wanted to continue pursuing creative writing because it really not only gave me an outlet in that time in the psych ward, but also gave me sort of a direction in life that I hadn't had before.
On that note, would you like to share some of your work with us?
I'd be happy to. This poem is called Outpatient. After therapy, I sit alone on the Centro bus stop bench. Sparrows peck the sidewalk littered with stray Takis and fossilized gum. Sparrows remind me of my grandpa. He babysat me weekends while my parents worked. He played violin in his kitchen, always Bach, always with the windows open and crushed almonds on the sills. Sparrows gathered and chirped. His neighbors yelled, "Bravo!" after he finished. On the bus, a woman yells about tort reform. The bus driver blows through stop signs. I don't mind. The streets are clear and the woman yelling looks like my mom. The ravens soaring in the sky are ink blots seeping into canvas. My eyelids flutter. I could pinch myself awake and make it to my house in time for Wheel of Fortune. Or I could fall asleep, miss my stop, and walk along the river path by the bus depot with deserted shopping carts and chirping crickets. It's warm inside the bus. A man across the aisle adjusts the tubes connected to his oxygen tank. I'm afraid of dying, not death.
Wow, it's a great poem. Thanks for sharing it with me.
Thank you for hearing it.
Misha, I'm really glad that our paths crossed this way so I could hear your story and hear your work.
It was my pleasure.
That's going to do it for this week's episode of the Howl Podcast. Come back next week and we'll have a story from Rivka Eckert.
And I knew that I was tired and dizzy and that I would have ringing in my ears and have a hard time falling asleep. But I didn't know that those physical experiences were not normal postpartum experiences.
The Howl is a co-production of NCPR and the Adirondack Center for Writing in Saranac Lake. The show is written, produced, edited, and hosted by me. I'm Ethan Shanty. David Summerstein is my script supervisor. Bill Hanel is our director of digital services, and Anna Williams-Bergen is our digital project specialist. Our theme music is by famous letter writer of Plattsburgh. To hear more stories and find out when we're going to be telling stories in your town, visit ncpr.org/howl. You can also pitch me your story for a chance to appear on the podcast when you write to me, Ethan, at ncpr.org. And if you or someone you know is experiencing an emotional crisis, the number to call or text is 988. For North Country Public Radio, I'm Ethan Shanty. This is the Howl Podcast.